Alright guys, welcome to my first UFC video. Today we're going to be talking about how we are going to get UFC 306 headlined by Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Now this fight has not, officially been signed by both fighters. It has been widely rumored that this will happen, and then even Ilia Topuria, in multiple podcast clips that I show in my shorts, has been talking about the fight. Obviously Max Holloway called him out after beating Justin Gaethje in the BMF title fight, which he won by knockout by the buzzer, which was one of the greatest fights of all time I've ever seen, and probably you've ever seen too. If you watched it, go watch it if you haven't. But when we're talking about Ilia Topuria, he has no fear of Max Holloway, at least not in my opinion. I don't think there's any fear there. I think Max Holloway is a really good fighter, but I don't think he's as good as Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is young. He's still growing as a fighter, still getting much better. And I think he'd much rather take this fight than Volkanovski at this point. Obviously, I think you want Volkanovski to be older. Volkanovski also wants, more time to rest, be with his family. He's not ready to take this fight. But with that being said, for the second fight, or the co-main on that card, they're looking at a guy like Sean O'Malley. Now, Sean O'Malley is a guy who could also fight on UFC 303, with Conor McGregor versus Chandler on there. He has made it clear that he's fine being a co-main on that event because, the pay-per-view money. The only other fight you could potentially see him, be the co-main on is UFC 306 in Spain, which is where it will most likely be if that's Max Holloway versus, Ilia Topuria. Obviously, Sean O'Malley is a guy who's called out Ilia Topuria after beating, whatever the heck his name is, at UFC 299. I always forget his name. I always forget his name, but he was trash anyways. It's really not, something that, you would really think, maybe Sean O'Malley would want to do. But for Sean O'Malley, he's made it very clear in multiple interviews, all he cares about at the end of the day is putting on the best shows and making lots of money. He'd definitely be making lots of pay-per-view money if it came down to UFC 306 in Spain, Real Madrid, having Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway, and then him versus whoever defending his belt. Obviously, this would probably lead up to, you'd probably see Max Holloway and, Sean O'Malley on the same side of the podium when it comes to Dana White, being in the middle for the press conference of UFC 306. You probably have them on that side and then Ilia on the other side versus also with whoever, whoever Sean O'Malley is fighting, which would be, pretty insane. I think, you'd see a lot of, Sean O'Malley talking trash about Ilia and saying how bad of a fighter he is and how Max is going to KO him, and if he does that, then he's going to have to fight Max or something like that, because at the end of the day, Sean O'Malley knows that people want to see him fight Ilia. He wants to go up in weight class potentially in the future. Obviously, it's really hard to see, Dana White wanting that to happen because, the featherweight is such a, trash division, or trash, it really isn't that good, honestly. Sean O'Malley is by far the biggest star in there. So having him, go up a weight class, potentially, being the same one as Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria, others. Obviously, Max Holloway can, go from, lightweight to, bantamweight or whatever. But I do think, Sean O'Malley at the end of the day has said it many times that he's comfortable going up in weight. He doesn't always like being at, his current weight because it's just, a little difficult, which it is for most fighters in that weight class for sure. But I do really think, at the end of the day, this will be a huge fight. This is really what the UFC wants at the end of the day. Their two biggest rising stars in their, the sport is Ilia Topuria and Sean O'Malley. Ilia Topuria is maybe the second or third most popular fighter in the world, and I know for most Americans they don't understand that, but when it comes to Spain has so many fans of the UFC. It's never been there because of all the soccer teams and all the other events that, get booked a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years in advance, and it's really hard to find a venue. Obviously, for, UFC, they want a big enough venue that also has a dome. For this, they'd probably have a retractable roof one. If it's with Real Madrid, which is being the rumored stadium that they would have, or the club they'd work with, which has, one of the most popular soccer teams in the world. So it'd make a ton of sense for them to, fight there and have a good UFC 306 card. And really what they're trying to set up here is not just this pay-per-view being one of the biggest of all time, but whenever Sean O'Malley and Ilia Topuria fight, that being one of the biggest pay-per-views of all time, because I think there's so much room for them, and this is really, I think, why, Dana White and Conor McGregor have been so slow for his comeback, is because they want to build up these stars, get them on other cards, get them, rising in the rankings, make them, the next guys to take over that pay-per-view, king spot. Because when you look at pay-per-views, I think like 8 or 9 out of the top 10 are all Conor McGregor pay-per-views, and it's really going to be hard, like he had Nate Diaz, Poirier, who do you have, like Khabib? He had so many, or those pay-per-views are just insane. And now you're going to have him fight Michael Chandler. There's a really good chance, that pay-per-view is in the top 10 because it's Conor's comeback. He's been gone. Obviously, the Roadhouse movie he was in recently on Amazon did so well, and that would be really big for them to, go ahead and have him come back. Obviously, you have he just has some of the biggest fans in the world. And wherever that fight is, which is rumored to be in New Jersey for International Fight Week, I think that's where Dana White said in his press conference after UFC 300. But, it could also, be changed at, any point. I do believe UFC 302 is also in New York. And then they also have, UFC Fight Week in Abu Dhabi between 302 and 303. And that's going to be a really big card, too, with a lot of Muslim fighters on it. Obviously, some guys from Russia who train with, guys like Arman Tsarukyan, Islam, and Khabib are going to be on that. And it's going to be a really, good card overall. And then they're also going to have UFC 305 or 304. I think 305, where they're going to have that in South Africa. And it's going to be Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, which is going to be really big. And I got to talk about this in the future, but Israel Adesanya is, going to retire soon. And he's only going to have 3 more fights left, which I'll just say on here, because I know a lot of you are going to see this from the YouTube Shorts that I'm linking this to. Make sure to subscribe also. I'm really trying to break into this UFC news realm. But he said he wants to, fight, Dricus, win that. He wants to then fight, I always forget his name, Makhachev, or how he says his name, who's going to be on the Abu Dhabi card. He's going to be the number 1 guy on that for the main event. And then he wants to fight Strickland as his last fight and avenge that loss. If he loses that Strickland fight, there's a really good chance, he sticks around for a little longer to try to beat him in a 3rd fight. But, who knows at that point? He's made so many millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And he's really, when you talk about the middleweight era, he has been one of the biggest, baddest middleweight fighters of all time. Really, when you talk about it, look at the guys he's beat. And, yeah, it's I think, that's a guy who went toe-to-toe with Pereira. He's a guy who, obviously lost to Strickland. There's a guy who beat Usman. He's a guy who's beat a lot of guys, and I think, or Anderson Silva, he's so good, and that's kind of, get back to this, but that's, a guy who's leaving the sport. When you talk about guys need to come up, they need Ilia Topuria to take on more of a workload, be a bigger name. They need guys like, Max Holloway to be a bigger name. They need guys like Sean O'Malley to be a bigger name. Obviously, it's not the same weight class, but they do need these guys to take a step up in popularity to keep growing the sport and to keep growing the UFC, because when you look at boxing's going to have a fall off here pretty soon. The celebrity boxing matches are already starting to fall off. Look at Nate Diaz's boxing match. It has no hype around it at all. And, when you have guys like Ryan Garcia, who I personally find very funny and interesting, it's kind of, the sport's dying. There's too many different fight leagues or boxing leagues, and it's just too unorganized at this point. So make sure to follow, subscribe, comment. If you're going to be excited for UFC 306, I'm surely going to be excited, especially if Sean O'Malley's on that card. I do expect him to be, because if it's in Spain, that's going to be such a turnout, and it's going to be one of the biggest, baddest cards of all time. Second best card of the year, obviously behind 300. I don't think 302 or 303 is going to beat that. And I don't think 305 or 304 will. UFC 301 is not that good. Unless Pereira is on it somehow, Alex Pereira. But I doubt he will be. So, yeah, make sure to follow, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.